Okay, we've finished now with Unit 1, which has taken us through the first 2 chapters of your textbook. And I hope that now you are starting to get a feel for the Hispanic world, for what the land is like, the roots of the people, and the roots of some of their culture. You should start to have an understanding of why, for example, the Catholic Church is so significant within the culture in the Hispanic world. And also some ideas about the variety of ethnicities and races in the region, and issues that may come up with gender and with social status. And we're going to continue to look at these types of issues, these types of cultural traits throughout the rest of the semester. So now we're going to move on to Unit 2. In Unit 2, we will be dealing with chapters 3 and 4 of your Latin America textbook. So chapter 3 is about independence and independence wars, or the ways that the different regions won their independence from Spain and Portugal. Latin America is an interesting case. Their independence came later than ours did here in the United States. And in some regions, it was a much longer and much more protracted process. They had, similar to us, grievances that stemmed from their mother country, whether that be Spain or Portugal, but they also had interesting outside influences that would drive the independence movements. So their independence, particularly in Spanish America, was a combination of internal and external forces at play. Things like reforms that were forced upon them from abroad, the desire to broaden trade outside of a colonial system, things such as changes of rulers, and then of course you had influences of the Enlightenment and of revolutions elsewhere. Interestingly enough, it was probably more the French Revolution that had an impact on Latin American independence than the American Revolution in many ways. And you'll read about that why in your textbook. So, and you'll also see why Brazil, which was the Portuguese colony in the Americas, was such a different case. The final straw for independence came actually from the Napoleonic Wars in Europe. And the reaction of the Spanish and the Portuguese crowns to the way the wars impacted their countries would have a great deal of influence upon how and why independence came about in their colonies. So this is what we're going to be looking at with chapter 3, is the winning of independence. And one of the things I'd really like you to think about while you are reading this chapter and going through all these reasons for independence and then how the wars were fought and who was involved, is I'd really like you to think about why Latin American countries intentionally do not call their independence wars revolutions. They call them their wars of independence. And there is a very clear reason for this. And hopefully you will work to see this as you are reading this chapter. In chapter 4, we'll be learning about the development of the new nations. Now, the development of new nations in Latin America was a very tumultuous process through most of the region. And you think about it, okay, Brazil had been all one big area controlled by Portugal. But Spain had controlled areas from all the way south in South America, up through South America, through Central America, through present-day Mexico, present-day Texas, and New Mexico, and California, and Oregon, and elsewhere. It was a huge colonial area. So then you have to decide, how are we going to form our new borders? And so that became an issue. and they had to decide who was going to rule and how. And there were all kinds of discrepancies. Discrepancies between people who wanted a republic versus people who wanted a monarchy. People who were federalists versus people who were centrists. So people who wanted a strong central system and others who wanted state systems. Both of conservatives versus liberals. And be careful when you're reading about the conservatives versus liberals, because the idea in the 19th century was quite different than we think of today with conservatives and liberals. There was issues for who would rule and how power would be balanced. How would you keep the masses in place? Or are we going to allow more freedoms and more equality? What do we do about slavery? And then, of course, there's also border issues, like I said. Deciding how do you draw the lines between nations and who gets to decide that. So the early independence period, or the early national period in Latin America, was a period of turmoil. And you will see through that the rise of what was known as the caudillo. Now, caudillos were political strongmen who had their basis in a more personalistic rule and through military force. And this is the reason why the PowerPoint I have posted for Chapter 4 is all about breaking down who some of the caudillos were and what were the characteristics of their rule and of the countries that they ruled in, to get a better understanding, because these were the people that would help to bring some form of stability, I guess, but would definitely not, at least in the time they were in power, create systems that allowed a lot of participation or very much equality. So that's what we're looking at in the 2 chapters we're doing. In your supplemental resources, you have a PowerPoint on each, a PowerPoint and independence for Chapter 3, and then, like I said, for Chapter 4, I've put together a PowerPoint on caudillos. I put a couple of very brief videos in the module, the homework module, for this unit. I did not put any supplemental readings in that module itself. The reason for this is right after this unit closes, you will have to be making your choice for your PowerPoint project. Remember, a part of this class, you have to do a research project. Now, I know some students get a little put off by that. You know, this is an online course, that seems like an awful lot. But you need to keep in mind that you are receiving 300 level credit for this class. And so a bit of extra work is expected, not just a single textbook for the class. So for this PowerPoint project, you are going to be choosing a topic that deals with a human rights issue in Latin America, either a current issue or a historic issue. I will be creating a separate module for this that will be all about the project, and the expectation as a part of these 2 weeks of this unit is that you will read the supplementary resources that I put in the initial part of the module, which will be choosing your project. And they will be, for example, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, the Pan-American Agreement on Human Rights, so you get a feel for what international organizations and what nations think of as human rights, and you can start to think about what you want to do for your project. I will also post a little bit more information or detail about what this project will entail, so you'll be able to read this. As you are working on this, if you have an interest in a certain human rights topic, or people who might work to ensure human rights, or organizations, or anything you think might fit for a topic, but you're not sure quite how it is an issue in Latin America or how it fits for Latin America, please contact me with your interests, because chances are, especially since I have taught classes on human rights in Latin America, chances are I will be able to direct you to a country or to an organization or to a time period or an issue that will fit with your interests. So keep that in mind. That module for the project, I will have it up and running over the next couple of days, so you will be able to access those resources very shortly. Besides that, you have a quiz on each of the chapters for this unit, so you will find those under tests and surveys. And again, you will have a discussion forum where you will interact on some questions that deal with the topics in the 2 chapters. As always, if you have any questions, if they're general in nature, of course, post them in the general discussion forum. Otherwise, you can email me, or we can set up office hours. Or if you're around Richmond, of course, feel free to pop in and see me. Okay, let's get going with Unit 2.